Hey guys, it's Ryan from The Dad Show. Before we get into today's episode, I'd like to take a minute to thank our sponsor. Have you been looking for a way to get on the water for some family fun? If so, please go visit my friends at Blue Springs Boat Company located in Kingston, Tennessee. Family owned and operated since 1988, Blue Springs Boat Company is the largest authorized Bennington and Regal dealership serving the East Tennessee area. They offer new and used boats, have a full parts department, and a certified service department on hand to help you with all your boating needs. They're proud to be your family's boat dealer. Let Blue Springs Boat Company help you find the right boat for you and your family. Visit them online at www.bluespringsboats.com or call 865-376-1472. Now, let's get to the podcast.
Welcome to the Dad Show Podcast, a show all about impacting, empowering, inspiring, and uplifting information to become a better dad, husband, man, and mentor. And now, your host, Ryan Ladd.
Welcome back to the Dad Show, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you for listening and for watching and for being here. I've got an amazing guest on the show today. He's a great guy, great friend of the family. Before I introduce him to you, though, I'd like to ask that you would follow us on all social media and engage with us at The Dad Show Podcast, as well as online at www.thedadshowpodcast.com. Now, getting back to my amazing guest and great guy and great friend,
Goodness,
great friend of the family. I've got Mr. Casey Peddicord on the show today, and his family has done a lot for us and been there for us through our trials and tribulations, and I can't thank him enough for that. But also I want to thank you for being here and being on the show today. And
thanks for having me, man. I'm excited. It's awesome.
It is. It's going to be fun, and man, I feel like it's going to be a really, really good show.
Hope so. We'll see. We'll see here. We'll see.
So, Casey, I'd like to ask that you would just open up and tell the audience a little bit about yourself and about your family and what you got going on.
Yeah, my name's Casey Peddicord. Gosh, I've grown up in this area. I feel like I've known you guys since I was so little. It seems like we've grown up in some of the same circles.
Well, it's a small town, you know.
It is. And we went to school with your wife, and gosh, I feel like I've known you forever. And so live here in Kingston, Tennessee, with my wife, my beautiful wife Kristin, and have two little girls, an almost 9-year-old Claire,
wow,
which is crazy.
That is crazy,
and a 20-month-old Khloe.
That is awesome, man. I cannot believe that Claire is
Isn't that
9
nuts, man? It's crazy. It's crazy.
And I think back, I'm like, Kennedy's 6, and that is crazy. Oh man, time's just flown by.
Dude.
Yeah, because we
Growing
both
up.
went through growing up, like you say, but going through everything that we've been through with our children.
Yeah.
It just seems like they were just babies, and then now.
What is it they say? The days are long, but the years are short.
Exactly.
That is so true, man. So true. Like, I look at Claire today, and it's like, oh my gosh, like 5 years ago, she could barely talk.
Yeah.
And now she was like acting like a teenager at 8.5, which is crazy.
So I'm really glad that you brought up Claire and Khloe, because I'm really excited to hear about how they came a part of your life and how the adoption process came about and all that. But man, when me and you get together, I can't help but think of, we probably shouldn't be here. We shouldn't have kids, and the good Lord has saved us and kept us on this earth for a reason, man. So I know that I had a pretty wild college era time in my life, and you were stating a little bit earlier that you were too. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. It's it's very humbling to look back on it and to see sort of the progression of getting married, having kids, being a dad. And when you look at it in retrospect, you're exactly right. I feel like, man, I'm so blessed, like truly. Not just saying that to say that,
yeah,
but like, I am so fortunate and feel so fortunate that God has allowed me to go through the journey that I'm going on. And it's interesting because when you're going up that mountain and everything's going good, you have to remember those low times too, about like, hey, when I was in college, man, I think a lot of guys out there do this, right? Like, you're in high school, you almost feel like at high school, you don't really have to do a whole lot. Like, you don't have to work a whole lot to get good grades. You don't have to put a whole bunch of effort in to be able to be the A student and that kind of stuff. And that was exactly me. Small town school, not a whole lot of people there. When I graduated with like 72 or something.
I think there was like 60 in my graduating class.
Yeah. It's crazy. And so you're in this little bubble, right? In this bubble, like I got scholarships to go to college and all this fun stuff and had opportunities and very, very blessed. But I got there and I kept that same mentality. And it was like, hey, this doesn't work all of a sudden. You found out like you had fun and you went and partied and hung out with girls and did this and, drank beer and all this fun stuff like that you thought was important at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And man, it went downhill for me really quick. Like I went to college, moved away from the parents, went to Nashville, and still have friends that I talk to today, like joined a fraternity, have fraternity brothers that I'll love and talk to forever. Great friends, great roommates and that kind of stuff. But man, my priorities were definitely not in order compared to where they are today. And, there were some low times in there, from a college standpoint. I think a lot of folks fall into that trap where you're 18, 19, 20 years old and the world wants to tell you, hey, you need to figure out what you want to do for the rest of your life. I had no freaking clue. Other people were like, I know I'm going to be a lawyer. I know I'm going to be a pilot. I didn't know.
Yeah, I didn't either.
I had no idea. People would say, hey, I think you'd be really good at sales, or hey, I think you'd be good at this, or you'd be good at that. I'm like, yeah, well, I don't really know. I went to school for recording industry and I didn't really study a whole lot. So I didn't do well in class, And I think my friends that went to school with me would tell me that, like, hey, you probably need to go to class a couple of times more a week, maybe than just one.
Other than saying, hey, get your butt to class. They're just kind of give you a look.
Right.
You may want to do that.
There wasn't somebody there to wake me up and go. And it sounds horrible saying it that way sometimes when you look back on it. But,
you're talking to a guy, and I'm really sad to say this, but I didn't want to go to class. You're talking to a guy that graduated with a 1.8 GPA out of high school.
Nice.
Okay, so
we're right there together, dude. It was funny because I went to school and like I got caught up in jobs. Like, here's a job just to survive, and here's this just to survive. And I got into retail management, did some different things, and then finally said, hey, I'm just going to have to work because school's not working out. Like, I went on probation in school, and gosh, looking back on it, I feel like school should have started at like 35 or 30.
Yes.
And I would have loved it.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have dove into history and math and all that fun stuff. And I hated it then. I just did not want to learn. And it had, my mindset has changed around that. But yeah, after a few years of college and a few years of working, I found myself, single, like living alone, kind of depressed. And all my friends were doing other things because they knew what they wanted to do, and I didn't really know. And so, take a step back. When I was in high school, I dated my wife for about 3 months, and I'll say it on the thing. She broke up with me, but that's beside the point. Love you, Kristin. But she broke up with me, and it was a mutual breakup, and we didn't talk. There were literally 8 years where we didn't speak.
Wow.
And I was working at a golf store, out of all places, and now we both love golf.
Yes, we do.
At a golf store in Nashville, and it was on MySpace. Believe it or not, this is a crazy story.
We're old, okay? We're really old.
Yeah. I'm not 40 yet, but we were on MySpace, and I saw Kristin. I was like, man, Kristin is beautiful. Like, I don't know why did we break up in high school? Like, it was a little high school relationship, and so we just started talking. And if it weren't for her today, like, there's no doubt in my mind that, man, I would probably be dead in a ditch somewhere.
Yes,
without
amen,
a doubt.
yeah.
Like, she is my saving angel that God put here for me.
And I say the same about Allie. And even us going through our early parts of our marriage, I should still be dead in a ditch. And, thankful that God gave me beautiful Kennedy and came into my life. And, it's unfortunate her disease, but really I feel like that's kind of what turned my life around and made me rededicate my life to the Lord and try to, I still walk a line like this, but it's not as curvy. I try to walk a little bit straighter line, but yeah, I'm 100% with you that I should be dead in a ditch, probably right across the street from where
I'm at. Yeah. We'll share a ditch, man. Share a ditch. Yeah, it's crazy the way that, God gives you these things, and you look back on it and you go, wow, like, it's taking a step back and I'm living in somebody else's apartment. Like there were a few days in between apartment moves that I lived in my car, you know, and thinking about those type things when you're, and it's like, you feel like you have this network of friends and network of family and stuff, but the pride steps in the way where you feel like you can't reach out and just ask like, hey, I need some help, or hey, I need this, or, you know, gosh, I'd really appreciate it if we could talk. And that pride was way up for me. And it still is an issue today. Like it's something that I deal with all the time.
I think that's part of being a male too. You're like, I can do this, you know, start beating your own chest. But really, whenever you reach out to friends or, you know, you talk to family or somebody that's a complete stranger, you find that help and you find that security, and then it actually builds your own confidence getting that stuff off, or even on the flip side of that, you not getting it off, but letting somebody else pull that reserve in you. And, you know,
totally, man. Totally. It's an image thing.
Yes.
Yeah. It's really interesting to me when I look back, and I know, you know, I love the premise of your podcast around being the dad show. And I look back, and my dad unfortunately passed away a couple years ago, almost 2 years ago to the day. From cancer that came on just super suddenly. He'd actually retired, and we found out he had cancer 6 months after he retired, and it just went downhill really quick. And I look back, and I love Dad, but from a, you know, there were certain things that I want to make sure that I instill in my kids or teach my girls, that I feel like maybe if Dad would have been here today, he would have said, hey, I probably could have done a better job at that too. Things like credit, for instance, or, you know, like, hey, when you get a bill, guess what? You got to pay your bill. Yeah. Like they'll actually come repo your car, believe it or not. It's not a fake story. Yeah. And it, you know, it leads me around to when me and Kristin got back together to give you some context on how deep that valley was for me. Kristin worked at a bank in Knoxville, and I had decided at the time, hey, I'm going to try to move back to Knoxville. Me and Kristin were talking, you know, didn't know where it was going to go, but I was going to move back from Nashville. And Kristin worked at this bank. Think about that. She's an employee at this bank, and my credit was so bad at the time that the bank wouldn't even give me a checking account. Wow. You know, and it's like Kristin, you know, I think about, there's a Need to Breathe song out right now that talks about, I don't know if you're Need to Breathe fan.
Oh, I'm a huge Need to Breathe fan.
You know, like, I'm not worthy of her love at all, period. Hands down. Today, even today, like, I will never be worthy of the way that she loves me, because when we started out, like, it was like a mountain between us, you know, like we enjoyed our time together, and we knew that we really liked each other, but like, she was perfect in my eyes, and I was just next to nothing. Yes. If that makes sense.
Rolling around in a mud puddle.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Right. And the pride thing, the image thing came into play, but it was one of those, like, we had to have several just sit down conversations to go, hey, like, we're not going to do this, and we have to align our goals and dreams. And for us, that was really a turning point, like to be able to go through that valley for me, and then to be able to come back up on the other side. And I would have never have done that if it wasn't for her.
But it isn't amazing how much drive, ambition, you know, just strength that you gained from looking back and seeing where you came from, how you had to crawl out of that hole, and up that mountain to where you are now. Like, you know, so when you look at something that is a huge project, or, you know, that may take a lot of strength for some people, you're like, I got this. I mean, where I've came from, you know, where I'm at today.
Gives you perspective.
Yes.
It does give you perspective. And for me, like my job, I work at a company called HubSpot, and a lot of people maybe have heard of HubSpot in different places, but I have the privilege of being able to sell or help partner companies all throughout North America come on board and bring their clients on board to HubSpot. And HubSpot was just named the #1 place to work. I think 4th year in a row on Glassdoor as far as nationwide company. Yeah. And I have to step back and go, like, I'm not supposed to work here, you know, like I'm not good enough to work here. But when you talk about the drive and the ambition and that kind of stuff, when you're at that bottom, it does give you that sense of like, hey, if I work hard enough and if I'm determined, I'm going to get there.
Yeah, exactly.
And I want to give that to my girls. I want to give that to Kristin. I want to give that to other people, you and other folks as well. So yeah, it definitely plays a role in
that motivation is huge for, you know, for anybody. Like you said, your kids, your family, your friends, you know, just acquaintances or some person that you may see outside the street. And they're like, no, I can't do that. I can't get there. But you can show them, no, I'm not supposed to be where I'm at. But isn't it funny how God works to put you in places that you don't feel worthy of? You don't, you know, God's grace is so forgiving, and he's such a good God to us that puts us in these beautiful places with these beautiful women that we're not supposed to be with as our wives, and gives us these blessings of children that, you know, like we stated, we're supposed to be in a ditch somewhere, not on this earth.
100%, man.
And look where we're at today.
Yeah.
And it's all because of drive and trust and faith in the Lord and finding him. And obviously the number ones are our wives, because I'm the same way. I wouldn't be where I'm at without Allie. So I kind of want to switch gears and get into the adoption process and how Claire and Khloe came into your life, because I can imagine that this is going to be huge for a lot of people listening, and it goes right at the heart of kind of what the Dad Show is. One of the goals and mission statements is those children out there, or those people that may not have a father figure or a mentor or even parents in their life, to be able to say, hey, I love you, I care about you, I'm proud of you, and you know, move them in a certain direction. So I'm really excited to and really interested to hear about this adoption process for Claire and Khloe, man.
Me and Kristin, when we got married, we both agreed that, hey, we wanted to adopt. Like, it wasn't just something that sparked or came up out of the blue. It was something that we had talked about. It was something that Kristin really had a heart for. And at first I supported her in that, but I grew to love it too, you know, in the first part of our marriage when we didn't have kids. Mm-hmm. And Khloe and Claire are two completely different stories, you know, partly because Claire is an international adoption and Khloe was a domestic adoption. But you know, when me and Kristin got together and said, hey, we're going to adopt, but, you know, we kept putting but in there. We kept saying, but we're going to have our own kids first. But we're going to do this first. We'll adopt after we do this. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have our own kids. And so we started doing things like went through some fertility treatments, and there was some medical stuff that we worked through. And, you know, I won't get into the whole detail, but basically that whole time of about 3 years, we were going, okay, we want to do this on our time. And at the end of that 3 years, we go, wait a minute, like, maybe this is not our time.
Yeah.
Maybe God has a completely different plan for us that we don't know about. And so we really dove in from a prayer standpoint and just said, like, even praying on our own, not even necessarily together, but on our own, just like reflecting, hey, what is it? What is the plan of all this? You know, we were both working, we were busy, we were doing things on our own. And it was very loud and clear to both of us one day that it was like, hey, you're trying to do this on you're trying to do this on your own time, and you're not trying to do it on my time.
Yes.
Just like plain as day, man, like God sitting next to you talking and telling you that.
Yeah.
And at that point it was like there was so much built up tension. You know, there were fights that we had about it. Like it trickled into a lot of other things in our relationship. And finally we just like released on it. You know, it was like, oh, okay, I get it now. I get it. And at that point, we had already started kind of talking about adoption, and we said, hey, we wanted to do this all along. Like, why don't we go with this? Like, this is no different. Why is this any different than having your own kids?
Yeah.
And so we started, you know, praying about, like, where do we go? What do we do? What does that look like? And it's interesting. A lot of people ask us a lot of questions, you know, living in rural, I probably didn't say that really well, rural, I say that word for some reason, rural East Tennessee. You know, there's some interesting aspects that people have around like international adoption. You hear things like, well, there's plenty of people here to adopt. Why would you adopt there?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we prayed about it, and we have comfort and peace that God's on the same page. Like, this is his plan for us. Mm-hmm. And that's all we needed. Like, I'm not here to appease anybody else. We feel like that's what we're led to do. So we're going to do that.
Yes.
And so we started this process. Claire was really interesting because when we started the process of adopting from China was just laid on our hearts. Like, it wasn't like we had a dartboard and threw a dart and we said, hey, China's it, you know? And it wasn't like somebody said, hey, you could get a child from China a lot quicker than other places. Like, that totally not the case.
Yes.
We just said, hey, Kristin has a heart for China. I feel like I have a heart for China. We were both on the same page about it. And so we started that journey and looking at different adoption agencies.
I kind of want to dive into that real quick, though, not even the adoption process, but with you and Kristin. Isn't it amazing? Like, me and Allie get into this all the time, where she's wanting to drive one street and I'm wanting to drive another street. We're all going to get to the same location, but, when we're trying to drive those separate streets or, not shooting the same goal, you're like, you can't get there. It takes you so long. But whenever you both line up and you say, this is what we're going to do, man, how much quicker and easier that road to travel to get to there is.
Sure.
I mean, that is, oh man,
it's crazy. And you have to do like your own prayer time and your own self time, I guess you would say, like sometimes you have to split up and think your own ways, and God will eventually bring you together if it's meant to be.
Yes.
But yeah, absolutely. It was interesting on the, on Claire's journey, because in China there are they call them special needs kids, right? Mm-hmm. And they say, hey, for a perfect child, quote unquote, you're going to wait so many years. And so are you open to special needs? And it's literally like a checklist. It's the craziest thing. They give you this checklist and say, hey, what are you tolerant to? And looking back on it, I'm like, it's craziness. Like,
yes.
I'm tolerant to everything.
Yes.
Like, I want to check box it all. Like, there's a kid somewhere who doesn't have parents that really, their special need is not even really that special. It's just a need that they want to be loved.
Yes.
Period.
Yeah.
And that takes care of a lot of stuff. Yes, there's medical things and other things, but like that takes care of so many needs just right out of the gate. When we were going through this adoption process, like there's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of paperwork and this and that. But at the end of the day, we kept saying, you know what? Like, there is a kid out there who is perfect for us and is meant to be for us and just needs a family. Like, just want somebody to love on them. And anyway, fast forward 2 years, it's interesting. We had checked a box that talked about heart disease, and we checked it because we were really ignorant to it. Like, we didn't know, didn't dive in, didn't ask any questions. And we got this file and it said, hey, like, this child has a fairly severe heart condition, heads up, had a surgery in China, probably going to have another surgery here, open heart surgery. And immediately when we saw the pictures, like, me and Kristin were both, that's our kid.
Yeah.
Like, it was as simple as that. Kristin got the picture. She sent it to me. I was at work. I remember looking at it. I remember where it was standing, and I said, no, that's my girl. That's it. Period. It was a done deal at that point.
Wow.
And so fast forward from then about 6 months, we traveled to China, got Claire, stayed over there for 3 weeks, and then brought her back home.
How was that, man? How was China? Like, what?
China was, it's so funny. I think China gets a bad rap, right? And I'm not saying that they're great or nothing, but we loved it. Like, we really enjoyed it. And it was, I think there's some stereotypes around adoption from China and around how they treat kids. And we saw nothing but loving people everywhere we went.
Wow.
We had just a fantastic experience. So we would go back, and I know that there's tensions in COVID and some other things that are going on just from a world standpoint. But when Claire turns 9 or 10, typically you would do what's called a heritage trip and take them back and show them different places. And we still plan on doing that.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. I would imagine that myself being a country old hillbilly with a good accent,
it's interesting.
That they would look at me and be like, nah, you need to go back to the United States, but
it's interesting. I do have a funny story about that too. When I was in China, so, Yeti hats, like everybody had a Yeti hat a couple years ago. I had a green Yeti hat. I thought, I'm just going to take my hat. I want to pack a lot of stuff. So I only took that one hat. I'm usually a hat guy. I'm not a hat guy today, but I'm usually a hat guy. And because I have a big bald spot, I'm bald, I'm getting old. But get to China, and me and Chris, I started wearing this hat around, and we started getting all these looks. Like, people are looking at us going, like, and giving me the eye. And I'm like, man, they really don't like Americans in this part of town or whatever. And we started posting some pictures online with some friends and family. And we have a close friend of ours who is from China, and she goes, "Oh my gosh, I forgot to tell you, you're not supposed to wear a green hat." I was like, "Why can't you wear a green hat?" And apparently that's a thing. Like in the old days, hundreds of years ago in China, the color hat that they wore would symbolize something that their family did or that their family was known for.
Oh,
and
wow.
green happened to be for that, hey, you had cheated on your wife. So here I am walking around China with a green hat, like arm in arm with Kristin, and people were like, hold up, dude.
You don't need to be so happy, girl.
Yeah, I have the green hat hung in my closet, and I haven't really worn it since. So it's set there.
That's an awesome story. That is. You're 100% right, though, man. You checking that box of heart disease or diabetes or depression or anything. I mean, love is 100% what those kids need. And a lot of us, even if we get love or shown love, imagine how much that cures in yourself,
Sure.
And so imagine being a little 3, 4, 5-year-old child that's never been shown love in their life, of what that can change. And a lot, like you said, a lot of those diseases, I mean, I know there's some genetic defects, obviously.
Right.
I know genetic defects, but
there's some supernatural stuff that you can't explain. You can't put your finger on.
yes.
But those kids typically do a little bit better, or sometimes all the times do a little bit better. And it was really interesting. And, for us, the other thing was, and this could be no matter where you're at, but like no matter what, we wanted to try to lead our child to know Jesus, like to have Jesus in their heart.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter if that person is in China, in Australia, or in Knoxville, Tennessee, like that's the small little impact or big impact, how you want to look at it, that we could make on our family, our kingdom, all that fun stuff.
Well, it's to grow the kingdom of God, not to glorify our own, and that's the main thing. You're reaching out to China now and have contacts there and, showing love and, showing them that you're cheating on your wife too with your great knowledge.
With my green hat. Oh,
but no, showing love and letting Jesus shine through you and God's love shine through you is making an impact all over the world, not just, like you said, not just at home where we're at now.
Sure.
And so would you advise anybody to do an international adoption over domestic for any reason, or vice versa? And
there's we were very lucky in that Claire's adoption was fairly airtight, I guess you would say. Like, we didn't really have a lot of hiccups. And I know you hear stories, and it's definitely country to country. But our experience was great. And I think a lot of that comes down to the agency that you choose. The agency that we took a lot of time to pick the agency that we were going to work through. And the agency that we picked had people on the ground in China. So they had people on the ground working specifically with that agency in certain countries. Mm-hmm. And that meant a lot to us. So when we landed, it wasn't somebody who wasn't aware of what we were doing. Like, we were with people who knew exactly what you were doing, the organization you were with the entire time. And that probably made our experience a lot better than maybe some other folks that I've seen out there. But at the end of the day, I think when you get that picture, or you get that feeling, or you hear God talking to you, like, that's your kid, like that's my girl. I'd never met her at that point, but I felt like, you'd stand in front of a bus for her.
Yeah.
You would take that shot for her without even meeting her.
Yes.
So, and
that love is great and deep, whether it's a biological child or not. That is your child. You are 100%. Her father. Kristin is her mother. So whenever you got back home, you got back into the States with Claire, how was that? What was that like?
Yeah. So it's different because Claire was a few years old already at the time, but couldn't speak English. So there was the language barrier was part of it. Right. And the heart condition was on top of it. And Claire's was pretty severe at the time. She'd had a surgery there. We knew that she'd have to have another surgery when she came here, and it would be open heart. And so there were different things that we had to adjust to. We were blessed in the situation that I was able to take off work for some time, mm-hmm. and Kristin was working at home at the time, was a photographer, and so she kind of could make her own schedule. And so we were able just to invest. And it's interesting to see, like, that time that we invested, even if it was only like 8 weeks, what are some of the fruits that have come of it now?
Yeah.
You know, like reading to Claire, taking that time to just sit down and play on the floor. And it's some of her favorite things. Like Claire if you gave Claire a book today and said, hey, just go read, like she'll sit in a corner and read all day long.
Wow.
Which is awesome. 5 years, she couldn't even speak English. And it's some of those seeds that you're able to plant when they're young, or, if you adopt, when you first get those kids, it's like a restart, right? For her, it was like a restart. She's basically starting over at 3 years old.
Yes.
And so it's like having a new kid. It's no different than having a baby, right? Minus Claire slept a little bit more. You didn't have to wake up every 3 hours.
Yeah.
But yeah, once we got over that, Claire had a surgery here, which repaired a lot of her heart, and she'll have some other things that she has to deal with down the road. But right now, if you saw her today, well, you've seen her.
Yeah.
Well, you would never know.
No,
she's
exactly.
just like she is a normal kid.
Yeah, she runs around like, no problem at all.
I do, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
A lot more
Exactly
stamina
right.
than me, I can tell you that. I'd take 2 steps.
Me too. I know. I know it.
So going through with Claire, with knowing that obviously in the pre-screening process, checking that box, you knew that she had something going on with her heart, and then whenever she got here, you stated that she had to have surgery pretty soon if you all got back. How, you being a new father to your new daughter, how did you deal with those emotions? And if you can expand on those emotions just a little bit on what you were feeling when you knew that your daughter was going to have surgery.
Yeah. I mean, I think the first feeling that came to mind was probably what any dad would experience of like, hey, I wish it was me.
Yes.
And not them.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting story. I keep saying interesting. I'm sorry I keep saying that, but I find an interesting story around Claire's blood type. So we knew that Claire would have to have open heart surgery, and they said, hey, you as a family member, you could go, try to donate blood, and we'll use your family's blood versus just the general blood bank. And, we were stressing about it. Like, I think anybody would stress about, hey, my kid's going to have open heart surgery. There's going to be some things that definitely some complications could go. And it's not a short surgery by any means. Like, there's some serious things that could happen. And you could sit and dwell on those. But when we went and got Claire's blood tested, and we had never known this before, but her blood type is B positive. And my blood type is B positive.
Wow.
And it was like, B positive. Like, that whole mindset all of a sudden was like, it's a God just like throwing something out there at you. Like, hey, look, it's cool, man. I got it.
Yes.
Like, we're going to make it through it. Maybe not be easy, but you're following the right path. If you get what I'm saying.
Oh yeah. 100%. Cause I can, those little, you want to call them signals, signs, little feeders that God will put out there to remind you He's walking with you. He's standing right there beside you. You may not think He's there because He's got the whole world to take care of, but He's a God big enough to take care of the whole world individually every time through every circumstance. And so those little signals He puts out is like
little signs.
You got it. You got it.
Bluebird in the window type thing.
Yeah.
And from then on, it was really, for me and Kristin, like, I was there. I just wanted to support Kristin. Like, I knew it'd be really hard on Kristin. I was trying to be strong for her. But at the end of the day, like, it's harder even to remember and recall. You know what I mean? Like, your
trauma brain is something serious.
Right. Like, you're in the hospital and you went through these hours and we spent weeks there, and I don't even remember some of it. But at the end of the day, like, this little girl was going through it, and we were just there to help her go through it.
No matter what, you're going to be there.
Right. No matter what that would be.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, hey, everything is, it went better than we thought it would go, which is fantastic. She's done really well. And I think me and Kristin grew a lot in our marriage through it too. Like, it showed you that you could overcome those type of hurdles together. Mm-hmm. And if you think about where we talked about earlier, we were so far apart when we first started talking. It's those things that you go through, some of those hard times together, that helps you align and say, okay, now we've got a clear vision of where we see our North Star. We see where we're going to go.
Yes.
We see what those are like.
And it helps to become a better team going through those, I mean, you got team projects that you do at work and other places, But when you and husband and wife become a team and have overcome those hurdles, and it's amazing what you can do and how easy it is to get there. And the little things that you used to fight over and, no longer really become a,
oh, so true, man. It's so true. And I'm a big John Maxwell fan. And he always talks about, and this is a leadership quote, but I think you can really apply it to your marriage. And this is something that I've tried to work on a ton because I'm bad at it. I'm really bad at it. Like, I'm the fixer. If you tell me what's wrong, I want to fix
exactly.
it. Like,
yep.
I'm that guy. Oh, well, let me tell you exactly what to do. And John Maxwell says you can either correct people or you can connect with people, but you can't do both at the same time.
Wow. That's pretty powerful.
And for me, like, I've got that saved on my phone. When I go to Evernote, I look at it. And I'm bad about that because Kristin will bring me something and she just wants to talk and I want to fix it. Like, I want to do that. And it's something that I have to continually work on too. Like, I just want to connect with her. I don't necessarily need to correct. And
just be listening.
Yeah. It can apply to so many different things, right? Your kids too.
Yes.
Like, you can correct your kids. And I think there is a part where you're going to correct them on a path that they're going on. But, in our household, if you like, don't cry over spilled milk type thing. Like, it's just a drink.
Yes, exactly.
If you spilled on the couch, it's a couch. Nobody cares. Like, if you break something, most of the time you can get another one.
Exactly.
Like, it's not that big of a deal. It's not worth getting worked up on. And I've got red hair. Kristin's got red hair. Like, we're fiery personalities. And so sometimes we do overreact, but at the end of the day, you just have to take a step back and go, like, they're human beings too. Like, you've messed up. You've done some really dumb things along the way too. Hey, it's like God in the back of your mind going, hey, remember college?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't kill you, so you shouldn't try to kill these kids now over just like spilling the water or something. So.
It's funny you bring up those minor decisions that can become so big because right now we know that our washer and dryer is on our last leg. And I'm like, it's a washer and dryer. It's going to wash clothes and it's going to dry clothes. Yeah. That's at the end of the day, we don't, that's it. And my wife is really, she's really stressed and really anxious over this whole process. And I'm like, literally, it is a piece of metal that's going to put water and soap and then it's going to dry. Like, that's it. Right. We just get a good brand and a good warranty and we're good to go. That's it. So I want to kind of touch on, being there for Kristin during this surgery process, because I can remember being in Cincinnati, especially at a time with Kennedy, because we thought her second transplant was failing, and being the dad or, being the husband, you need to be that rock, that firm foundation, that solid foundation for them to be able to rest on. And I can remember one time in particular that me and Allie were talking and it was really becoming just a bad, it was really becoming just really hard, really tough with what we're dealing with. She may have to go through another round of chemo and try to go through the transplant process, which all that's just terrible in itself. And so we were really down and out, and I was really trying to be that solid rock, that solid foundation. And, I had to actually say, look, I looked around for the room just a way to get out there. I said, I love you, babe. I need to go do the laundry at the apartment. I mean, there was like 2 or 3 clothes in the laundry bag, but I just grabbed it, and her and Kennedy were going to take a nap. So I let them take a nap, and dude, as soon as I got out to the parking lot, it was just, emotions ran over me, and I had to get that out. And I just started praying, and God just, reached down, pulled that off of me. And I did go do laundry actually at the apartment and came back. But, nice. God, like you said, those little feeder signals and everything, he reached down, he pulled that off of me and gave me the strength to go back and be the rock for my family that I needed to be. So was there any tough times during that process that you can remember in particular that got to you? Or
yeah, it was, I think about perspective during all that. So Claire's heart condition had, to sum it up, I won't go into detail, but basically her body didn't get enough oxygenated blood. And so, like, when we saw her, there were things like maybe her lips were a little blue. They weren't flush like they would be with a normal functioning heart. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, like, oh man, like, Kristin is not going to make it through this. Like, Kristin is, I am going to have to be that person. And when Claire came out of surgery, she's in the ICU, hooked up to all this stuff, there's tubes going everywhere. We walk into the room and Kristin starts crying. And I thought, oh man, this is it. Like, she's going to just completely break down. And the nurse goes, this is an ICU nurse, talks to all kinds of families, in this exact situation all the time. They have a whole heart floor at the hospital we were at. And the nurse goes, oh man, I know it's overwhelming to see her in this situation. Like, I know it can be very tough for you. And Kristin just goes, like a total God thing. Kristin goes, no, I've never seen her that pink before.
Wow. And
from a perspective standpoint, like, like for me, mind blown. Like I would, I lost it at that point.
Oh yeah.
Because I kept thinking, I'm going to have to really step up and take control in this. And no, like I didn't hit that point because Kristin had that mindset, and we had already been talking about it and praying about it. And, are there tough times in that? Sure. Like, after you've slept in a hospital bed for, 10 days, it's like my back hurts, my leg hurts. Like, I just want to go sleep in my own bed. Yes. But at the end of the day, it brought us together in a way that nothing else really had at that point.
Yeah. And that's, one of the things that I'm grateful for about Kennedy and Lincoln's diagnosis and treatment and everything they've been through, because of how close it's brought my wife and I and our relationship and how strong it's made us. So I can definitely agree with you that, going through that makes you stronger than anything you've ever been.
It makes you think about things like, hey, guess what? Our budget is a little short this month, like maybe $500 short or something, or, hey, we've got this bill that we need to pay, or, hey, we've got to do this to the house. It's all just stuff at the end of the day. Amen. And you've made it through these milestones. Like, and because you've made it through that, I think God's going, hey, like I brought you through this. Now you got to do something. Like, there's a whole nother plan down the road that keeps growing. It's not going to get easier from here. There's going to be other things because you overcame that.
Yes. And there was other things growing.
There was,
because Khloe coming into your life, obviously there was stuff growing. So, give us a little bit of insight on Khloe.
Little Khloe. It's funny. Me and Kristin had talked, after we got Claire, we were like, okay, do we want to have more kids? Do we want to adopt again? Like, what does this look like? And we were very happy with Claire. Like, I think me and Kristin had said several times, hey, we're happy with just one kid. And it's funny, a family friend called us one time and goes, hey, this was last spring. Me and Kristin were getting ready to celebrate 10 years together of marriage. And this family member, or friend, called us and goes, hey, like there's a kid, a newborn baby that, needs a family, essentially what it is. And we know that you guys have adopted before. Kristin had shared a lot about our adoption story. Mm-hmm. And they said, hey, I know you've got friends that have adopted and you guys went through it before. Do you know anybody? that would be interested in adopting this little girl? We were like, no, not off the top of our head. We'll ask around for you. And Kristin hung up the phone and went about my day. She went about her day. And at night, we were both just kind of sitting there. And the next day, like we went to sleep. Next day, we were both kind of like, hey, were they calling for us? Like, were they talking to us this time? Or because we really didn't know, like nobody off the top of our head that, sometimes you have those scenarios where you could say, oh yeah, I know somebody that would love to take care of this child.
Yes.
We didn't. And we were just like, hey, maybe this is us that they're talking to. And 6 months later, man, we officially adopted her. And so it's interesting because we went through the international route and we've done the domestic adoption too, and completely different processes, totally different emotions in both of them on how they work and how the court systems work and paperwork and all that fun stuff. But Khloe's rocking and rolling, man. Khloe's great. She runs around saying Baba and Mama and feed me and all kinds of fun stuff. So,
isn't it one of the things that I'm very interested in? So, obviously I've got Kennedy and Lincoln. So Kennedy is a daddy's girl. Lincoln is a mama's boy. Having two daughters, man. Are they both daddy's girls or?
Kristin would tell you yes. It's funny. I feel like Khloe is in this dad stage right now where Kristin can't even put her to bed she freaks out if I'm not there. And so it's kind of good that it's during this time of COVID and quarantine, because we've been able just to stay at home and not interrupt her schedule a whole lot. But yeah, I think I like to say they're both daddy's girls.
Is there anything different obviously there's about 7.5 years difference in age there. And I know that there's going to be different things, but is there, main stuff that you do with Khloe that you don't do with Claire, or, vice versa? Is there? Well,
for us, or for me, I've tried to say, hey, like, we're going to set certain times just for us, and date nights. We'll call it date nights. Like, me and Kristin have a date night, and me and Claire have a date night. Yeah. And Claire has a date night with Kristin every once in a while too. And we used to be on a schedule. Obviously, COVID's kind of messed that up a little bit, but
it's messed everything up.
Yeah. But just having that time, we're big Bob Goff fans too. I don't know if you've ever read Bob Goff's books, but in one of his books, he talks about he always does a 10-year trip with his kids. And that's something that we want to implement too. So, like, not the whole family, but just me and Claire. When she's 10, we'll go on a father and daughter trip somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so it's those little things, it's making those little moments. And it can be as simple as, hey, you're at work and you get lunch to 1 o'clock, you get noon to 1 o'clock. Like, are you going to eat during that whole time, or can you take 30 minutes and eat and then take 15 minutes and walk to the mailbox with your kid?
Yes.
Let them check the mail, or let them drive in the driveway of the car, or even just sitting down and reading a story to them, like, still doing that and investing in that relationship. It's no different than investing in the relationship with your wife.
Yes.
Or your parents, and I think I took a lot of that for granted when I was younger. Really took it with a grain of salt, friends and family. And that's something that I want to teach my kids. Hey, those relationships are important, and you have to nurture those relationships. And it's just like a plant, right? If you don't water it,
it's going to die.
It's going to die.
The more time you spend on that relationship and the more you invest in that relationship, the better it's going to be completely all the way around.
That's right.
And, that's kind of leads me into one of my other questions that I've got for you is, you and your wife have been through some low times. You and your wife have been through a couple of adoption processes, and you continue to grow. So now, I know COVID's obviously put a huge damper on a lot of stuff,
yeah.
but what are some things that you and your wife do to kind of help continue to build your relationship and grow closer and invest in that?
This is going to sound really cheesy, all right? And it's going to sound really old too. But one of the things that and this is mostly all me, where that pride stepped in, I think one of the things that we've done to grow closer together is really being transparent with each other, like being vocal about it. And it can be over the dumbest stuff, like, hey, budget wise, like, why don't you have a budget meeting at your business, right? Like, you guys talk about budget. Why don't we have a budget meeting at home? Like, why don't we talk about that once a week, even if it's just me and Kristin, and it may be sitting in bed on your computer while you're watching Netflix.
Yeah.
But we're just having a transparent conversation around, like, hey, here's this and here's what we want to accomplish, and tying some different goals to it and tying some different timelines to it. And I think that has really, like, I think we're pretty clear together on, hey, what do we want to do in the next 12 months? What do we want to do in the next 3 years? And what do we want to do in the next 10 years? Mm-hmm. And how does that trickle down into what restaurant we go to today? Do we stay at home? Do we go out to eat? Like, what does that look like from a money standpoint? How does that play in from a career standpoint? Where do we position ourselves to do that? And then at the end of the day, writing that down, putting it on a piece of paper.
Yes.
Putting it on, I noticed when I walked into your house, you got a whiteboard upstairs. Love that, man. We got a whiteboard too. Like, write that down. Mm-hmm. You might have to erase it at some point. You might have to scratch half of it off. Yeah. But guess what? It's still there, and it's still staring you in the face.
Yes. Look at it every day.
I think the other big thing is, for me, like, from a dad standpoint, is don't assume that somebody else is going to do it for you. And I think about love, for instance. Like, if you don't love them, somebody else is going to.
Yes.
And in like mine and Kristin's world, I guess you would say, like, I try to go into any activity from a mindset standpoint of like, hey, I'm going to do this. Like, I would love for Kristin to do it, but I'm not going to get mad if she doesn't. And I think she feels the same way for her. Like, she assumes that she's going to do it. And if I don't, she's okay with that. And we've had to have those conversations and talk it out. In the book, Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, it talks about when you have daughters that as guys, like, I think if me and you rode in a car to California, we could probably go half the trip and not talk to each other. You know, like most guys are like that.
Yeah.
And I fall into this trap a lot. And with daughters in that book, it talks about talking double, like saying things, not just saying like, Claire, you're beautiful. Like, Claire, you're beautiful because you're so different than anybody else. You're completely unique in the whole world. And just expounding upon all your words because they end up using those words and they soak it in. But especially from a father-daughter standpoint, like we tend to hold those words in and man, I want to let it out. Like I'll sit there and tell Khloe, who can't really talk yet, but say things like, Khloe, you're beautiful. You know, you're pretty.
Yeah.
Your hair is great. And she'll smile and act like she's, knows what we're talking about. But all that stuff accumulates over time. All that positive reinforcement of putting that into somebody, and it pays dividends down the road.
I mean, look how much negativity's in our world just completely.
Dude,
so
crazy.
if you, and I even said this in the last podcast, that there's so much negativity outside. There's no reason for negativity in your own household. If you go outside and you walk down the street and you just smile and ask a complete stranger who's looking down at the ground and gloomy, hey, how you doing? Or, hey, buddy, I hope everything's good.
Yeah.
How much that brings them up. If those few words can change that perspective on the street to somebody that you don't know, imagine how much those positive words and love can change your household, who you're with every single day.
100%, man. And the exact opposite too. Like those words are so strong that in your marriage, I was really bad about this. When we first got married, like I would say things and not know how it hurts Kristin. And nobody's perfect. I still say things today that I'm like, man,
why did I say that?
I should not have said that. Like that was not smart. I'm going to pay for that.
Well, we're guys, we mess up a lot.
We
right?
do. But now I think we're to a point to where, hey, it's okay when we just walk away from each other for a minute. You talked about going to do the laundry, just getting away from the situation for just a minute because you don't want to say something you're going to regret forever.
Yes.
And you're going to have those tense moments. But
it's part of being a husband and wife.
It is. And, it's interesting, especially with the, political year, the presidential election, there's so much hate going on. There's so much name calling and this and that. And, I'm going to know if this guy's listening to the podcast because I'm going to bring his name up. But I have a good buddy named David Buckner. And David, we worked together for 10 years, and he has a kid with a heart condition too. And, he told me one time, because I was asking him about political stuff, and I used to post some stuff online that was like, oh, man, probably not a good idea to do that. And David really never did that. It was always in a positive light. And he told me one time, and it stuck with me forever, but he said, you're never going to make yourself look good by making somebody else look bad.
Exactly.
Period.
Yes.
And he lives by that, and I love it. And, we can joke and do those things, but, I think it's a perfect time to teach your kids that. Like, when you see those ad campaigns that are negative and this and that, like, you don't have to buy into that. You have your own thoughts, but we don't talk about people in a bad light, no matter who they are.
And
everybody's
like you said,
a person.
just walk away, just leave it, leave the
Exactly.
situation, leave the conversation, leave the commercial on the TV, whatever, just get away from it so it doesn't affect you personally.
That's exactly right.
And I love how you talk about transparency with your wife and your daughter. And that's, from a medical dad standpoint, and I'm sure that you can relate to this as well, is the fact that you learn to overly communicate whenever your child's in the hospital and has to have certain medications at certain times. If I know me and Allie would switch out, and if I didn't relay to her, we gave this medication at this time, and because it was on, a tight schedule. Yes, exactly. Right. And so now, I get on. I'm not going to just toot my own horn and say I'm the greatest at communication, but I get on to my wife constantly because I'm like, don't tell me just to get the blue bag out of the house. Tell me where the blue bag is, what else is colors on the bag, overly communicate that because, and I know I'm using a handbag as an example, but overly communicating those small things and the big things is going to make your marriage and your relationship a lot deeper. And honestly, it's going to be a lot easier. Like we was talking about earlier, if you both are overly communicating, then you both know the goal, and that road's going to be a whole lot easier and a lot less bumpy to travel to get to the end point, no matter if it is just going into the house to get the blue handbag, like it's going to make the whole aspect of everything in your marriage and your relationship so much easier and better.
It is. Even if it's little things like, hey, here's what I need to do next week. I used to hold that stuff in, and I'm still bad about it. Like, I'm still working on it, but hey, just, maybe we have a mutual calendar.
Yes.
I think about systems, putting systems in place, doing, something to standardize it. Would you, in your business, would you run it this way? No, you wouldn't.
No.
Like, you're not going to do that.
Yeah. Send memo after memo after memo out.
Right. Why would you do it in your marriage? So at the end of the day, man, I think me and you on a marriage standpoint, obviously we both hit the jackpot, and I think we're both undeserving of the love that we get from our significant others.
Amen. 100% on the same page with you there. We stated it multiple times earlier. I don't deserve what I have today.
Yeah, and I think something else that always sticks with me. Another John Maxwell quote, but I think if you're listening to this podcast and you're walking away from, something that you could walk away with is John Maxwell always says, you're either preparing or you're repairing.
Yes.
One or the other. And you can't get in that trap of just being in repair mode all the time.
No.
You have to prepare for what's next, prepare for the goals, prepare for the life lessons, prepare your girls, prepare your boys, get them ready for that.
And
next step.
That's that over communication. It's easier to prepare when you know that end goal that you both want it to result in.
That's right, man.
So Casey, I just want to say thank you, man. This was awesome. I've had really good conversation.
Thank you,
we could
Appreciate
stay here
you.
for hours, I believe, and talking and giving nuggets. But is there anywhere that the listeners can go if they want to dive deeper into your story or your life? And is there anywhere that they can go and connect with you? And
yeah, I am horrible with social media. My wife is like the social media queen, and I am not that person. But you can find me on Instagram or Facebook if you have any questions. I'm happy to respond there. But definitely go follow my wife because she has way more stuff to share on there as well. I'll try to do a better job.
Yeah, she is awesome. I have to say, if this podcast ever gets big enough, Kristin, you're on the team. Okay, you're in. No, guys, it is Thanksgiving week. I messed up on last week's podcast and stated that it's Thanksgiving week. I got my dates mixed up. It was really late at night whenever I recorded that, so I want to say sorry. So it is actually Thanksgiving week. I hope that everybody's got their grocery shopping done and got all their family gatherings planned. And there's a whole lot of political mess out there about that you shouldn't be having Thanksgiving gatherings with your family and all that. No, go spend time with your family. Just be smart and intelligent. But anyways, we're not going to get into the whole political aspect on this show. But I do want to thank you guys for being here. Like I said, please go follow Casey and Kristin on Instagram and Facebook and show them some love. And also, if you would, go follow the Dad Show Podcast on all social media sites at the Dad Show Podcast, or you can connect with us on our website at thedadshowpodcast.com. Again, I hope you and your family have an amazing Thanksgiving. I want to thank you for being here and spending your time with us, and God bless you all. We love you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Dad Show Podcast. Please like, review, and subscribe.